And right now we want to train our focus on land and affordable housing this morning. And I'm joined by none other by Charles Kerich, of course, who is the CAC for Lands, Urban Planning and Housing, Nairobi City County Government. And also we have Johnson Denge, who is a Senior Manager, Regional Markets from Cyton Investments. And we're eagerly waiting also for other panelists to join us this morning. I'll introduce them as they are here in the studio much later in the course of the program. They're caught up in traffic this morning. But if you have any questions about land, if you have any questions about affordable housing, we want to see how is the terrain right now. We're just coming from a very intense electioneering process. And of course, we know that particular sector was adversely affected when it comes, of course, to, accessing funds to buy houses. And we want to know what is really up the collective sleeves of the Nairobi City County as far as also making sure that we have affordable houses for our citizens. So you can actually head over to our Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV, or also our Twitter or our profile name on Facebook is AM Live NTV, and 20505 is also our SMS portal. Our numbers will be up momentarily. And of course, you can also chime in. You can call in, ask questions, or share your contributions as well. Good morning, gentlemen. Right. Let's just begin with Charles Kerich. First of all, of course, yes, such a swing on the pendulum, from the media right now to the county government. How has been, the settling in?
Very interesting. A steep learning curve. The last time I was here, we was on press pass.
I know.
Discussing media matters.
Yes.
Now, I'm been given other responsibilities.
Yes.
I would not call them lighter duties.
Yes.
I think they are actually heavier.
Yes.
But yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, it's a different ball game altogether. I am now at a place where I have the opportunity to actually bring the real change that we have been espousing for years. Mm-hmm. So I'm in charge of lands and planning and housing, which is a really important component of Nairobi City County government. Our sector is responsible for probably half of the revenue of Nairobi City County government. Of course, the highest source of revenue is rates.
Yes.
Where we've been collecting about 3 billion shillings per year. And we also have the single business permit comes second. Then we have other issues like parking and outdoor advertising. So at least 2 of them are in my sector. So it's quite a challenge.
All right. Okay, but we want just to hear from your own experience, because when you actually go into this particular government, you have in mind the issue of cartels that are wedged deeper, and the cake, is really baked in the cake. I mean, the cartels. What first of all has been, your perception as you're trying to shake into place?
Look, I went there and decided that, I will arrive with the assumption that I do not know what these cartels are. So I will do what needs to be done. And it is only at the point of somebody blocking me completely from doing what I need to do that I will then say, oh, so this is what the cartel looks like. But if you go there anticipating hurdles and problems in advance, then you might not be as effective. So why don't I just, look at my governor's manifesto, prioritize what needs to be done, do what needs to be done, start by taking the necessary steps. And the cartels, I think I have not encountered them yet, although I'm just about 1 month old in that docket. But I wouldn't say that anybody has really come to stand in my way. Maybe because also I have a very forceful governor who would not, broach any nonsense. But for now, I have not encountered the cartels, and I do not want to really spend my time imagining that they are there. I really have a task ahead of me that I would like to achieve. And like I said, it is only when somebody has completely blocked my way that I will then know or assume that this is probably the cartels people are talking about.
Right. Let's hear from Mr. Denge. First of all, we just want to lay the ground work on how affordable housing layout is in the country. And then Mr. Kerich will tell us, of course, what also is involved in urban planning and of development as well. But just give us, currently, coming from an electioneering process, and I know Cyton normally come up with reports, I think every week, and Sunday get a report. Could you just give us a snippet of what is happening right now within this particular sector?
Basically, affordable housing or aspiration of owning a house in Kenya remains a mirage.
It's a mirage.
Yeah, with about just about 9, especially about 11% in Nairobi.
Yes.
for instance, owning their houses. 91% or some call like 89% of Nairobians being renters. So we remain largely a rental market. If you go to other cities, Mombasa, around 87% renting. You go to areas like Kisumu, around 86% renting. And a couple of factors that are leading to people not being able to own houses. According to World Bank, about 60% of urban dwellers live in what we'll call informal settlements.
Yes.
A huge deficit nationally, looking at around a deficit of about 200,000 units every year, with a backlog of closer to 2 million of housing missing. So a huge opportunity on how to provide these houses. I mean, a lot of challenges, and this is now, I think, why we need really to talk about how do we make these houses affordable for Kenyans.
But when we're talking about affordable houses, what is affordable houses? You know, is it fabricated houses? You know, is it containers? Is it what is, from your own estimation, what will be an affordable house?
Affordable is not necessarily cheap, or it's not necessarily substandard. Affordable, generally described as a house that is deemed to reflect the pricing of a median income,
yes,
of a given population, as described by a government, a local government, or a recognizable index. In Kenyan context, and if you just look at the big four, affordable housing is being defined as that house where each Kenyan is able to pay back or own through paying an equivalent amount of what they are paying for rent. So that is what is available. If you're paying rent, for instance, 30,000 shillings per month, then that rent should be able to be for you to pay comfortably for a mortgage to own that house you live in. So that is what the context of affordable currently.
Okay. All right. Let's say from Kerich, affordable housing, because I think also this has been up the collective sleeves of the county government. We want to know from your own area, because we always hear about strategies, or this is the strategic document for maybe 2017 to 2025. Yes, but we've never realized. We always hear about plans and planning, and we're planning and we're launching and we're about to. And so it is always, you know, waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. But what, from your own reading right now, would be an affordable housing from the county government perspective of Nairobi?
We, I think, are going to be very aggressive on another term then I want to introduce is social housing.
Social housing?
Yes, which is, housing that takes into consideration the financial abilities of the majority of the people. Many people live in squalor in this city, and a very small percentage are homeowners. So we have a lot of land as Nairobi City County government. We have estates sitting on close to 1,000 acres, and there are very few units there. These were houses that were built during the colonial era. Remember, Nairobi was planned so that there was segregation about where the white would live, where the Indians would live, and where the black people would live. Yes. So the Eastlands part was this part that was reserved for, the indigenous Kenyans. But there is a lot of land there. So that we don't continue talking about plans and master plans, yes, and launches, and we already, yes, do have a master plan called the New Plan. We have identified 7 estates outside Eastlands and several within Eastlands for what we are calling urban regeneration. So let me just talk about them briefly so that you get context of what we are talking about. So we have, for example, a place called Old Ngara, yeah, and New Ngara, Parklands, yes, Jivanji bachelor's quarters. We have some land on Ngong Road, and a few other places where we have said, because we own the land, which is our collateral, we want people to then come and develop houses at their cost. And once they develop the house, we will then split those houses. They will keep some and sell, or keep them for rental, and the county will get some to sell or keep them for rental. the whole idea is that this house cannot cost more than 2 million shillings. Because there is a glut of 4-bedroom apartments in Kilimani without any demand.
Yes.
You know, there is no more demand for 4-bedroom houses. What we really need is what people can afford. So somebody earning a salary of 20,000 shillings, which would really be good in many parts of this city, would not be able to buy a house for the 15 million shillings that apartments in this other side of town are going for. So we've come up with a model. First thing we are doing is to put up what we are calling decanting sites. And we are beginning with Bahati Estate, where we will put up a basic unit, move the people who are living in that place to those units, and then demolish that place. We will get about 100 acres there. Now, if in 20 acres alone, we can set up high-rise units, apartments that are 30 stories each, that are really small. I don't know if you've seen a place like a high-rise.
Yes.
You know, it's not huge, it's not ostentatious, it's not big, but you have, you know, the decent facilities that you require, so that maybe you have a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom house. Then we make sure that the cost of construction is kept down. What makes houses very expensive in Nairobi, first of all, is the cost of land. In my view, I think it's really exaggerated. I don't think that's the actual value of 1 acre of land in Gigiri or in Upper Hill, where land is going for 600 million shillings.
It's overrated.
You know, it's really exaggerated. Yes. So because we are providing the land as a county, so remove that cost. So the eventual cost of the house should not then be expensive. So that now if we have several units, we are targeting by within 3 years to begin having at least 2,000 units available in the market. We are then able to stop the demand for Mabati structures. Because if you can make units available that cost 2 million shillings and people have a mortgage facility, it is possible to actually then begin to meet that demand. But apart from the non-Eastlands, we also are doing a similar project in this side of Eastlands. So we've already put out an expression of interest advert in the newspaper asking people to come, bring their concepts and their proposals. We will provide the land. The advert went out, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So really, I think by the end of this year, we are going to stop talking about concepts and plans and so on, but we will actually be doing groundbreaking
ceremonies, of course. Yeah. Right. Let's just hear from Denge as well, maybe from Saiton Investments, because we know also Saiton has been, you know, targeting high-end markets, you know, Karen and, you know, the Runda and the likes. But when it comes to this Mwananchi, and as we're talking about social housing, as the way Mr. Kerich is putting it, what is really up your collective sleeves as well, from your end?
I think a good question, because really, as he points out, land or the general things that is really delaying us to make or people to get into affordable housing or the social housing is the costs associated with coming up with this development.
Yes.
If you look at even the deficit we are talking about of 200,000 units,
yes,
it is in the bottom of the pyramid of the society.
Yes.
So this demand is more houses that will target people who are earning 20, 30,000 and who are not able to afford the houses that are coming in. There are a couple of challenges. If you look at the land that is available, there is limitation in what we'll call serviced land. Limitations or challenges in what we'll call a serviced land.
Yeah.
Land is available, but is it serviced? So you find a developer going in, putting in infrastructure, basic infrastructure, the sewer, basic water, basic roads. These costs eventually are pushed back to the end user in terms of getting.
Yes.
Land itself, because of demand and supply, end up also being high, a cost that comes in. Cost of construction, which is attributed to about 70% of a cost of a house,
yes,
also is passed to the end. So as Saiton, we've tried to perhaps more play in the affordable housing, trying to target to bring houses. We have houses 5 million. We have houses in the range of more 5 to 10 million.
Yes.
To try and bring it affordable, to try and target these Kenyans who will be getting it. Sometimes a 5 million house will not necessarily be, a Kenyan will not necessarily have 5 million cash to pay. So what is Saiton doing to make sure you are able to access this house? Saiton is coming in and say you can pay slowly. We are planning a payment plan where you start paying immediately, even before we break ground.
Yes.
So that we give you time for you to spread your cash flows in your ownership of the house. So we have this payment plan. Other things we are working on is to come up with things like a tenant purchase. How do you come in, pay a little, maybe a deposit, and then the rest is spread over your stay in the house as you own slowly. We are also looking at doing masses.
Yes.
Utilizing what we'll call plot ratios or densification, so that we are using less land, using the verticals to bring in more units, so that you are also able to bring, with scale, you're able to bring cost down. We are also exploring issues to do with technology, using modern technology to try and get to lower costs of this housing, so that we are not just being conventional or going to the old system of brick and stone. We are trying to bring in more modern technology in terms of things like EPS to try and lower the cost of the houses. So that's all the things we are doing.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Kerich.
Maybe something to point out is that there have been initiatives by the private sector.
Yes.
There are people who understand the market that exists in Kayole and Dandora, and many of them have responded to that demand by setting up units that are affordable, and they are affordable because you can see the houses are occupied.
Yes.
Of course, some try and cut shortcuts in planning. You've seen in pipeline, sometimes you encounter building collapsing, and so that becomes a real issue in terms of enforcement. But a lot of these landlords could do more if they owned the title documents for the land on which they sit. So you'll find that somebody got an allocation 30 years ago.
Yes.
But they do not have a title.
Yes.
And the banks nowadays will not accept for you to take an allocation letter as security to borrow. Whereas if you had a real title, you would then use it as security, borrow money, and put up more houses.
Yes.
And so that's why we have targeted to issue 50,000 titles to the people who are in what we were calling the site and service schemes.
Yes.
And I think for the first time, those people are closest to receiving their titles. They have been promised several times in the past. In fact, when we set out to do this process of issuing the titling, many of them were skeptical. So you tell people, we now have all the documents, we just need your identification documents, among other things. And people say, we will not bring our IDs because we have been asked to bring them several times in the past. Why should we continue bringing our documents and we don't seem to see any progress towards getting our titles?
Yes.
So the process has really been going on. We want the president to, by June, come and issue the initial batch of 30,000 titles. That's going to be a game changer in this side of town. People will now be able to use those documents to borrow, and they will use that borrowed money to build even more houses. So we are going to see a real change. By the end of the year, you see a lot of construction happening in that side of town. The titling process is going on. Again, as I said, it's not just a plan. We have engaged about 5 big law firms to begin the process of preparing the leases. And our target is that by June, 50,000 titles should be ready. But in the meantime, at least in the next 1 month, we want to complete 30,000 of those titles.
All right. Okay. Of course, we want to also introduce our panelists who's just joined us this morning. Chairman, just introduce yourself to other panelists who are here this morning. And of course, the topic is land and affordable housing. And of course, you've been also very, very particular in making sure that Kenyans also are accessing this, affordable houses as well, and also the issue of land. Very briefly, the traffickers
as glad to be here.
Yes.
My name is Maina Samuel, Chairman of the Housing Cooperative Society.
Thank you.
And today we have a very pertinent discussion on land and housing affordability, because they are intertwined in that the cost of land impacts on the cost of the house. But again, when we talk of affordability vis-a-vis low cost, cheap houses, low cost houses, what makes a house cheap is informed by other factors. But affordability is a relative term.
Yes,
that what is affordable to me is based on my disposable income. But when we say reducing cost, is getting value at a subsidized cost, not necessarily compromising on the product, or in the case of a house.
Yes.
Of course, I know my colleagues here have discussed other parameters that are considered, the variables that are considered in low-cost pricing. That is the cost of land, the cost of financing, the cost of material, and the economies of scale, vis-a-vis low, medium, and high density, considerations. Because with the high density, you don't care so much about the space and so many other things. But I wanted to bring an angle of social housing. You see, how can we also try to bridge the gap by ensuring that as much as there is an economic aspect in the housing, there's also a social angle. And that is what will cushion the 60% of our population in urban setting who live in slums and semi-permanent dwellings. It's only 40% who live in what we would call comfortable houses. I want to also bring in the idea that there's a backlog. In our country, there's a backlog of over 2 million houses accumulated over time within a shortfall of 150,000 units per year. How do you bridge this gap? We do this by creating interventions through the government initiative like they are proposing to do, and working with the players in the industry like my colleague panelists here who have been in the segment, and they can position themselves to partake of this and work with the government instead of the government again coming to reinvent the wheel, and making sure that the people who understand what it means when we talk of low end, and we are talking of very, very affordable houses that nobody has ventured because of one reason. It is not sustainable, economically speaking, not unless you bring the social support through government interventions, waivers, discounts, and also mobilization of mass construction of houses. The only time it can make sense is when you do it in large scale. Low cost cannot be sustainable if it is done in large scale, in small scale.
Yes.
Number two, what are the parameters that the government can try to mitigate on? The second one is the cost of land. Government has a lot of land that they can avail to those in the industry who want to work in that direction. If land is provided for this purpose, we can save as much as 40% of the cost. Then when we do other mitigations of coming together and bringing different players in the segment, it can also further reduce another 20–30% by making sure that the approvals are hastened, they are standardized, and they don't become very cumbersome in processing terms. So when we look at those factors and variables that actually have a big impact in the cost of low-cost housing and projections, the government can reduce almost by half. And that will reach the hitherto less lucrative, attractive segment of the low bottom of the pyramid. The other thing is the mortgage. If you look at the mortgage system since independence, it is at 22,000, 23,000. That is a drop in the ocean, owing to the vast and the large volume of civil servants and other people who are not able to access mortgage because mortgage finances at the end. And this brings a problem because to characterize a house or any project or property, you need to have it completed before. So how can you bring this in the fore? Is by making sure that people are empowered to buy to pay towards owning. So the rent is converted to ownership. And this is making sure that we can even introduce zero deposit to your house, where I can start paying my 15,000 that I pay for rent towards ownership of that house, and we stagger it within 15, 20 years.
Thank you.
But today it is not possible because the bank wants you to pay within 5 years. The disposable income for most of the civil servants and people in the industry cannot afford even a third towards ownership within 5 years. So they need to be given flexible, long-term purchase so that the government will give them power. And through the circles, the cooperative societies and the other players, they know their members. I know the members of Urithi. If they are empowered, I know how to follow up that debt until they clear.
Thank you.
So that will be a two-pronged approach, that the government will not keep on chasing people.
Thank you.
But using the players in the industry.
Thank you. Kerich, will you allow me just to pick one caller who's hanging on the line, then we'll come back to the discussion. Maybe Ibrahim from Mombasa is hanging on the line. Good morning, Ibrahim.
Good morning, habari yako?
Mzuri sana, how are you?
I'm fine, and you? Nasema mimi,
yes.
Ukienda kwa upande wa land, naenda kwa upande wa land. Unajua sisi Kenya yetu, hata tunashindwa na wanyama. Wanyama wakuna ardhi kubwa sana, ukiangalia Masai Mara, ukiangalia Savo West, lakini sisi Kenya wenyewe binadamu bado ameshikana, amebanana mpaka hakuna mali anaweza kupumua. Ukiangalia ukienda kama Kilifi Plantation kule unakuta ng'ombe ndio wamelala huko. Alafu tukikuja kwa upande wa hada za watu kuchunga kwa mama. Kwa nini tusiwaekee kama tuna ardhi kubwa ambayo ni ya wanyama na wanyama wanakaa kule? Kwa nini ukifika wakati wa ukame hao watu wasipewe askari wakaenda kwa hizo mbuga za wanyama wakachungia wanyama wao, kwa sababu na hali pia ni wanyama ambao wanakaa huko. Kitu la pili, tunaenda kwa upande wa affordable housing. Hakuna kitu kama hiyo. Kwanza tukue na affordable food katika meza. Mkenya sana analala na njaa, chakula iko juu, unasema affordable housing. Hakuna kitu kama hiyo.
Okay. All right. Asante Ibrahim. Of course, we'll take more callers as well, and then we'll get also a chance for our panelists to answer that. So, hakuna kitu kama hiyo. Ibrahim,
well, I will tell you that in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very basic needs of a human being is food, shelter, and clothing.
Yes.
So you cannot dismiss shelter, because shelter is something everybody must have. So I think the issue of affordable housing is still on the table. But while we are on it, before we get too immersed in regenerating all the states and so on, you know, there is also the issue of slums in this city. Let me give you the example of Mukuru slum, just as an example of how this matter probably needs to be addressed. Mukuru is a piece of land that is about 700 acres. You know, covering the area of Mukuru, Kwaruben, Viwandani, and Kwanjenga, and this other side.
Yes.
This was land that the government set aside for industrial use, allocated it in the 80s with the condition that whoever received the allotment was supposed to set up an industry within 2 years. Many of them did not set up those industries. So the land reverted back to the government. And then what happened is that the same land was then allocated to influential people. If you hear about the people who own the land in Mukuru, it's names of millionaires, not the people who live there. So these people have the allotment letter. They do not have the titles. Because nature abhors a vacuum, when people see empty land, they set up the shanties. So the Mukuru is almost completely built up. 94% or 95% of the people who live there don't own that land. And they live in houses owned by people who don't have titles to that land. So how do you address a problem like that? So I think that's why we came up with something called the Mukuru Special Planning Area, because you need now a special plan to set up infrastructure, to set up roads, and to be able to see how these people who are currently living there can get ownership. If they have been living there for all those years, then surely they must have some, you know, interest in that land. But the special planning area then allows you to also build roads into the slum. You've seen situations where there's a fire in the slum and the engine cannot even reach where the fire is, because you know there's just houses everywhere. So the special planning area then says, look, on average you would need to have a 9-meter road, but inside Mukuru slums, do you really need a 9 or 12-meter road? It might not be necessary. So then allows exemptions to be able to even have narrower roads, but then, you know, at least there to be a road and there to be sewage and so on.
Right.
Because when people live there, they have no tenure, they have what they call the poverty penalty. The person who lives in Mukuru pays more for water than the person who lives in Kilimani, because he buys it in small jerrycans, which are then priced at maybe 10 shillings. When you calculate per unit how much they have spent, you find that they are actually spending more to pay for essential services. So the issue of slum upgrading is also very key. Even as we move, you know, we have talked about Eastlands and non-Eastlands and these high-rise buildings and so on. But eventually, I mean, we have to also get a lasting solution to the issue of places like Kibera and Mathare and Mukuru.
Right. Maybe for most of our site on investment, you can also bring us to the fore to really understand what sort of he talks about, you know, upgrading the slums, slum upgrading. And I think even slum, we don't really want to upgrade the slums. Yeah. We should get another maybe coinage for that particular, because we want to discuss the whole issue about slum altogether. But I don't know what sort of, he said affordability is relative. You know, depending on your pockets, what could be affordable to me is not what can be affordable to you. But give us a range on this low-cost housing that also site on investment has, that you know in the market right now.
We are looking at products in the region of about 3 million to about maybe 7, and
so that is not the 2 million that Charles Kerich is. So this is a very different market segment that you actually looking at.
And that is why it's important to also differentiate between social housing and affordable housing.
Yes, social housing and
affordable housing. Those are two different terms that sometimes are confused. Social housing is what he's talking about, a house that is looking at enabling the less fortunate in the society to at least access some decent housing or some decent accommodation. Sometimes it's subsidized, for instance, where he's talking about they will issue land for free. Sometimes it is given to special group of a society because perhaps they cannot afford or they are not like employed. In other countries, you will hear social housing associated with unemployed, the street guys. In Kenya, perhaps we should look at it from those people who are earning a smaller wage. But affordable housing is more merging between what you are comfortably, and as I said, in simple terms, and just looking at how the government is even defining it in the Big Four, merging it with what you are comfortable paying as rent as to be your comfortable repayment for a mortgage towards ownership of that building, of that house or home. In that a 10 million house will be affordable to a certain person because they've been paying a relative, perhaps rent of 50,000, which they can use again to pay. But currently, the way we are now, a typical house, for instance, a 9 million house in Nairobi, using the current cap rate of 14% as a mortgage, that person end up paying about, to be precise, about 101,000 per month. Now, how many people can afford this? A 9 million house is found where? In Nairobi or in the metropolis. It's found in the low middle class area with a lower, when you buy such a house, the rent that is attracting is lower. So you find that a person who is living in a typical 2-bedroom, 9 million house, somewhere in Donholm or such places, is paying perhaps a rental of 30,000. Yet if it was in it was a mortgage, or he'd been given a mortgage as the same with a local financier at a 14%, then he'll be required to almost do 1.5 or 2 times or 3 times what he's paying as rent. Now, what we are saying is that how do we make sure that this person who is paying for a house worth, let's say 9 million in Donholm, is able to use his current rent of 30,000 is paying for the same house to still service a financing or a mortgage. So this brings in the issues about how are we financing the end user, how are we financing also the developer, because the developer will load this financing cost to the end product, and then how do we solve the offtake after the house is ready. So aligning these things, how do we enable, and as he's saying, how do we enable issues to do with what he says, slum upgrading. You said we don't use slum, but it's true they have slum. I'll use a better one. How do we upgrade informal settlements?
Informal settlements,
yes. To make them better. And that's now what we need to be discussing and looking at. How do we make sure that even this, because we've had slum upgrades or informal upgrades previously as part of government. But you find out you upgrade the informal settlement, these guys, the houses attract wrong people. You find other people getting it.
So it's not the real beneficiaries.
Yeah, the real beneficiaries don't do. So how do you, so the issue is about to look at it wholesomely, because when you find the targeted beneficiary not getting into this housing,
yes,
then it tells you even the targeted, the people who are getting in were in somewhere that they were not comfortable. So they're actually aligning themselves to where they belong. And then you end up finding the targeted market not also taking it.
Thank you.
So it's to look at it holistically, holistically, all the way to align it so that everybody is able to get, and that's a basic need of getting. Just even looking at what Ibrahim is saying on, we should not really be sorting housing. If you look at government, big four of manufacturing, health, issues to do with food and nutrition, and then housing. Housing, for me, is the biggest of all.
Thank you.
Because if you don't have an accommodation, even if you are given food or this, they are all dependent on housing.
Right, thank you. Let's just also rope in David Karau, who's the chair of Telegan Group, home to King's Pride Properties. A very good morning to you. Traffic has actually affected you as well. Right, but we want also to give you an opportunity to tell us, as we're talking about land and affordable housing as well, from your own estimation as King's Properties as well, this is a side of the market that we know. Maybe from the cooperative societies, from also your organizations as well, how do you cater for the social housing?
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. I think the subject of discussion today is quite interesting to us, because when we rolled in the zero deposit arrangement,
yes,
we were basically trying to bring in affordable. We were trying to make houses affordable to the masses of to the Kenyan public, and some of the challenges that comes with affordable housing. One of them is, who is this affording? Because what happens, and I'm happy somebody has raised that point, that you may target, you may come up with housing like, say you're talking of 3 million house, but instead of making it affordable to the people of that category, one rich person comes and buys the whole 300 units, and again decides this will be the rent. And therefore, as we look at affordable housing, how does this also affordable housing get to the people that are being targeted for that? So for us, that as making it as much as you're getting low-cost housing, you also need to get to know how this low-income earner is also able to get financing for this. And I'm happy that we have government representatives here, because as you can see, most of the houses, the affordable houses, the only way, one of the ways to achieve that is to do it in where land is not very expensive. But when you get that land, you need infrastructure in that place. You need things like sewer, things like the road networks and all that. So I'm happy that now it's becoming, the government has come in with the housing as as one of the big four, because all the stakeholders will now look at it, and be it the financial sector, be it ourselves, the developers, be it the government. We are just yesterday there was a meeting between Kenya private developers and the ministry officials, and that kind of discussions will bring out tangible solutions to the existing, because for us as developers, we know exactly what we want from the government to achieve this. And when the government is giving us a hearing on that, we are excited about it. Yeah.
All right. Maybe also as a cause of interest of time, and I think also we will actually take this conversation another time. We drill deeper because of interest of time. Some of you have been affected also by traffic as well. But Kerich, as maybe you can give us, and we are trying now to wind up, the issue of credit, we know, and access to finances is big. And I've heard you mentioning, of course, you'll offer land, and then maybe they can develop property. What sort of an arrangement is it that we hear here, or did I hear my own things? Because sometimes it can be very tricky that, yes, you have the land, I have my property, then the issues of, you know, the entitlement to the land and the housing, it becomes a different kettle of fish. You know that this is the current regime. Other regimes will come with different also scenarios on that particular arrangement, and it can be very messy. So how am I sure that if I have been given, you list land to me, I put up a structure, then maybe 10, 20 years down the line, these issues of leases will not really affect me? Very briefly.
The land is not being given to anybody.
It's not being given.
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership.
Yes, so we have the land.
Yeah, but we want to know what is this partnership
that comes from Kuwait or wherever. You sign an agreement.
Yes.
You put up the houses. The reversionary interest on the title of that land belongs to the Nairobi City County government. So even if it is the lease is for 60 years or 99 years, it will revert to the county government. But it's a partnership where we provide the land, you bring the capital, we build the project together. So that when we give somebody a title, it is we as Nairobi County. That is the comfort that people will have, because they want to know who they are dealing with. So the idea is for this investor to earn some profit from the project. So they will get some units, we will get some units, and they can rent them out or they can sell them. But once they have sold them, they will then exit. So all we are doing is saying, look, cost of land is a big hindrance to housing in this city. We have the land. And not only do we have the land, we actually have the instruments and authority and power to be able to not just regulate, but to actually do what needs to be done. So it's like a PPP, private-public partnership, where we come together, we sign an agreement, we do the project together. Yeah, so there's no risk of any land going away. We are not dishing out titles to people, no. The land will remain Nairobi City County land. All right,
so we have a PPP there. I heard you also talking about a TPP, the tenant, partners.
Yeah, TPS,
TPS
purchase scheme.
Yeah, tenant purchase land purchase scheme. Yeah. Let's see also from Samuel as well. Yeah, that one will be an interest to many, right? Who sometimes they don't really have, the initial deposit that you're talking about. Then how is that arrangement? And does it mean that I just start paying the rent, or maybe substantially given, the formative years, I'll begin by paying more, then it decreases along the years?
Now, it will depend on the segmentation and the profiling of the consumers. We look at the niche under which each operator is in. For example, what Urithi is doing and what Saiton is doing and other players are doing could be different based on the model. But one thing that is key is that Saiton will deal with their people, Urithi will deal with her people. And what happens is that when we are supported as an institution, we cater for our niche. If you look at the niche that we are in at Urithi, we have the low, middle low, and upper low. That is a segment that operates between, for low, yes, 1 million and below. For middle, 1 to 3 million, and 3 to 5 or 6, that is upper low. So that is how we have profiled our niche. And then Saiton will come and take their niche maybe from the middle low and up there. But the bottom line is that when this segmentation is done, we know what is the need in each category. Needless to say, in low-cost houses, we talk of the house that you need, not the house that you want. When you say, I want this house, that is relative to your disposable income and your stage in life and your economic status at that time. Time is of very pertinent importance, because if you do a house today that will take 3 years, my economic status might have changed, deteriorated, or improved. So if you are doing a house for 2-bedroom to this young person that takes 3-4 years because of other challenges, it means that by the time you are availed in this house, this person will have a family, will have other demands that house may not be there. Then people upgrade houses. When we talk of the cost of the house, it's also informed by the finishes and those other things, that we can have the same house with different finishes. So what is very basic, for low cost, we must go to the very basic needs. If you look at a floor that is just screeding, as we know it, and red oxide, as we put it, vis-a-vis a house that is tiled, ceramic tiled, and even we have different types of tiles. We have different types of finishes, wood finishes. You see, it's not a question of the size of the house.
Yes.
It's also the question of the material you are using and the time it is taking, the cost of land, and the cost of financing. Let me very fast talk about the cost of financing. What happens is that in most of these cases, you are forced to take money to buy land and to construct. And then you get finance at that point. But when the consumer is coming to purchase the land, the house, they cannot afford at that stage. Remember, it was financed in the first tier. So when they are coming at the second tier of purchase, it also means that they will go to the bank, get finance at the second tier. So what we are saying is that through cooperatives, through circles, we need to finance it at the first tier. You come to the circle, take a loan, buy that house, and you continue paying through the mechanisms that are established within the organization you are serving. So like Urithi, we have Urithi Premier Circle and Urithi Housing. Urithi Premier Circle provides loan, a little saving towards purchase, and you are left paying in a staggered and structured way. Then you cap the housing, they do the actual construction.
Thank you.
Because there is that complementarity. So each organization may have their own model.
Thank you.
So if the government understands the model of each organization, bring them according to the niche that they occupy, it will be more complementary than competitive, because the need here, we cannot even do 50% of the demand in the market.
Right, thank you. And I think we're strapped for time. I'll just give 30 seconds to each of you to wind up. I think this is, as I mentioned, a very good topic that we need to continue with it, looking at different aspects of it. So time has not been really on our side, and I know how also traffic affected most of you. So I just will give 30 seconds to you, each of you, beginning with Denge. 30 seconds.
I think housing is important, and we want to appeal, especially to government, to provide enabling, especially as developers. Saiton is doing all it can to make sure we are able to provide products that are able to benefit Kenyans. So it's just to appeal for an enabling environment in terms of legislation, supportive infrastructure, so that we are able to be given an opportunity to provide these products.
Thank you. Mr. Kerich.
Yeah, I think the regeneration of the old estate in Nairobi and the issuance of titles is going to be a game changer in this city. For the first time, people who have been waiting for titles for 30 years are going to receive the titles.
Yes.
And that's really going to have a big impact. And all these old estates that have over the years become rundown,
yes,
are really going to change. I mean, you had when the president was campaigning last year before the election, and he went to Eastland and said within a short time you will not be able to recognize this place. In fact, the phrase he uses is "mutafikiri muko London." So we might not get to London per se, but really you will see the huge changes that we have there, because the estates that we've identified are more than 10 in number. So you can imagine each one getting an investor bringing billions who is putting up high-rise buildings, low-cost houses that people can afford. It's really going to be a game changer. Right. So I ask Nairobi residents to continue supporting us the way they have supported us. We have a big problem of empty spaces being invaded every day, and then that continues with the land problem that we have. But we are handling it, and we are very optimistic for the future. So the issue of also settlement and resettlement will be another one, and that is a topic for another day as well. Let's hear from Semo, very briefly.
Thank you. This is very timely, especially the idea of affordable low-cost houses. At Urithi, we are very prepared. We've been doing it for the last 6 years. On Saturday, I'll be handing over, 7th of April, I'll be handing over 100 units under Nyumba Mia arrangement. And this is doable, and we believe if you need affordable, what is totally affordable in the market, come to Urithi na utaridhika. Thank you very much. Let's hear from David, very briefly.
Yes, as I said, this is exciting that our zero deposit model is now the talk of every Kenyan, because basically the affordability will depend on the providers of the housing, and we are there. Affordable financial support, which I believe is the biggest challenge we have. And thirdly is the government support with the necessary infrastructures and models. And I'm happy that that is being addressed by all the stakeholders. So what I would appeal is that let's continue with the same. The government should consult with the private sector, because we have the solutions that probably they are looking for.
Thank you.